Hello, folks. Welcome to Between Awesome and Disaster. This is your host, Will Carey. Thanks for listening. I appreciate you being here. Hope you're doing well. It is Sunday when I'm recording this, so if you are listening to this now, you are in the future. I hope it still exists. I hope you're doing well. I've been on a run of feeling pretty good, and that's going to continue into my conversation today. My guest on the show is Hattie Hayes, who's a comedian in New York City and a sketch performer. Sorry about the little ding there, or maybe you can't hear it, and I sound like I'm crazy. My guest today is a comedian, Hattie Hayes, and we're gonna talk a lot about kind of her journey into where she is in comedy right now. But she is very active in the sketch scene, and she also runs a show at QED here in New York City. And we had a really lovely conversation. She's also one half of the podcast Tadar, which examines the queer themes in Taylor Swift's music. So that's where this conversation starts. And then we have a really great conversation about country music and its relation to LGBTQ themes, which is not something I talk about hardly ever, but this was an excellent opportunity to get to do that. So I'm really looking forward to sharing this chat I had with Hattie Hayes. If you are like me and are trying to get something creative that you are making out into the world, then you might know exactly where I'm coming from. So if you guys like this show and know someone who you think might also be interested in the show, we're available wherever you get your podcasts, Apple, Stitcher, Spotify. Any way that people listen to the show helps other people find the show. And if I'm doing something that you find interesting, then thank you very much for being here. I appreciate the support with your ears and with your minds. So thank you for being here. You can follow me on Twitter at @ComicWillCarey, and I will talk to you guys at the end of this. But for now, let's go to my chat with Hattie Hayes. Have all of the technology here. I talk about this a lot, but having like the boom mic, the boom arms, and like a couple of different things to plug in, I feel like makes me feel like I'm actually doing a podcast as opposed to just like when I first started, I was just had the portable recorder and like the handheld mics, which I do sometimes, but makes it feel professional.
I'm used to sitting in bed with a Yeti mic balanced on my lap and then just kind of leaning forward and hoping for the best, which that's so this is very streamlined.
I freak out so much at those USB Yeti mics. I just don't think they sound very good.
Yeah, that's I'm lucky because I don't know anything about sound engineering whatsoever. So I'm like this all. I'm like I like high pitched noises. I like the song Mambo Number 5. I have no taste when it comes to sound. So there's a loud screech. Okay, I'm good with that.
What's your podcast?
It is called Tadar, and it is all about Taylor Swift, and it is a queer reading of her work.
That's right. Yes.
Sarah Kennedy.
Yeah. You do that with Sarah Kennedy.
Yeah.
And it's is the premise of the show that Taylor Swift is like a closeted lesbian, and it's like there in her music, and we just haven't figured it out yet.
That is to some degree the premise, because Sarah is a lesbian and I am bisexual, and so both of us relate very hard to the copious queer themes that are in Taylor's music, and a lot of people don't pick up on those either because they're not looking for them or because they're straight, and why would they? So it's not like a serial thing, where we're setting out to prove that Taylor Swift is in fact a lesbian, but it's tracking like, okay, she wrote a song that uses tons of imagery from Alice in Wonderland, and she at the same time was supposedly dating Diana Agron from Glee, who had an Alice in Wonderland tattoo, which she got removed after the song came out. Like, what could that mean?
Right.
And then just like the themes that come up, especially in her 2 most recent albums about having to hide from the world and having a lot of secrets. And it's like, Taylor Swift, you're not hiding from the world. We see you on Instagram. You have a very controlled image. Whatever you're hiding, it's not a straight relationship. Whatever you feel like you're hiding, it's not what everyone thinks it is. So it's, and that's one that we have finished season 1, and we'll someday get to a season 2. You know, she moved.
Totally.
So,
Yeah, I hope she comes back, because I was trying to get her on for like a year, and we just could never get it figured out. I ho- if that theory is true, which I would trust your opinion on it, I imagine when she like hits her 40s, I don't know how old she is now.
she just turned 30 in December.
Okay, just so in another 10 to 15 years, there's like a very excellent like Americana kind of style album that she's going to release, and I think that once she's like done with the like teen mainstream pop
Right.
thing, because I actually liked her music back when she was doing that kind of like schmaltzy pop country, because I
Right.
thought the songs were actually good.
Well, and it's interesting too because her most recent album, Lover, which came out in August, is by far her most sonically complex. Probably the biggest criticism that people had was that it is really kind of all over the place in terms of sound. And it really does, I think, show the scope of her talent in a way that other albums didn't. It's themed more around ideas than like a cohesive auditory narrative, I guess. And so you
Sure.
get some really interesting experimental stuff. And you also get her first country track in a long time, which is with the Dixie Chicks.
Oh, really?
And so that's kind of interesting too, that shows up towards the back half of the album.
I see.
And it's a song about her mother, actually, who's very, very ill with cancer. And so it's, I mean, her first song to chart on the country charts for a long time, but also for the Dixie Chicks, which is pretty interesting.
Yeah.
She's kind of been, I think, saving her capital in the country world. And she still writes country songs for other performers. She featured on a song, I think by Sugarland, called Babe, which won a lot of awards, which she wrote, and she wrote the treatment for. Incidentally, the treatment for that video, what happens in that video is shot for shot almost an exact remake of a video that her supposed ex-girlfriend Diana Agron starred in by the Killers. So that's kind of interesting. You can put together a frame by frame of the exact same shots, which is kind of interesting. I don't think that's necessarily something I would do as a straight woman to someone I had been rumored to have been dating, but you know, I'm not straight, so what do I know?
Right.
So she's kind of saved up her country capital and deployed it to help other people in country, like the Dixie Chicks, who were in many ways excommunicated from the country community for expressing their political views.
Sure.
And so when you look at Taylor's transition into pop music and this concept that she's kind of going for maybe a younger audience or a more mainstream audience, it's like, well, is she aligning herself that way just because of the money? Because, I mean, Taylor Swift is above all things a capitalist. But is she aligning herself that way because pop fans are going to be more open to a queer musician than country fans are, at least at this point in time? So I love the concept of her someday, you know, kind of dropping on us all the country that she has been saving up for all these years, because I'm sure it's out there. I'm sure it's in her vault in one of her Rhode Island homes, or you know, whatever she has. So I'm sure it's there. But it is
Totally.
interesting to track that trajectory and see how that aligns with her political goals.
Right. I almost always wonder, because I view country music as more of like a lifestyle genre. Like I feel like you artists in that genre, similar to like metal or punk, are like kind of lifers for those bands, whereas I find pop fans more fickle, but you can get like a bigger explosion very quickly. So I don't know if you're almost like basically, you know, working a whole bunch of jobs so that you could save up to like blow everybody's minds when you're later on. I like this sort of like a more friendly conspiracy theory-esque like dissection into popular culture, because I probably am and I'm better about it now, but there was a long time where I considered most like pop music and culture kind of like vapid and designed in a lab to generate Spotify streams and YouTube views and iTunes downloads. Like I think I remember reading something about how there's like a formula to like there's a certain number of beats per minute,
a certain length of song, a certain, you know, this is when the bridge needs to hit, and this is you know, what your key change needs to sound like. It's definitely, and I definitely used to have that mindset too. And when I was in high school and in middle school, which is when Taylor Swift was really coming out into the world and really making her debut. And when she was up until Red, when she was still pretty country centric, I hated her. But that's because I grew up in Missouri and I was used to real country. And so
Yes.
I was very anti Swift for a long time because I didn't think that her sound meshed with what I thought of as country, because that's what I, in many ways grew up on. Same
Sure.
reason I wasn't allowed to listen to Shania Twain, because my grandma was like, she wouldn't know country if it bit her in the butt. And so no Shania in my household.
I kind of want to trace this, but I want to ask you something first. Have you heard Jimmy Eat World's cover of We're Never Ever Getting Back Together?
Yes.
I think that's a great version of that song. The reason I've always been cool with Taylor Swift is before she got super famous, she collaborated with emo and pop punk bands. Like she did a song with Boys Like Girls.
Yeah.
And then I saw a video of she was doing a show in Arizona, and she brought out Jim from Jimmy Eat World to play the middle, and she was like, "This man wrote some of the songs," and I was like, got me through the hardest times of my life. I'm like, "You're cool, Taylor Swift.
Yeah.
I dig you. You probably have opinions on clarity."
Yeah.
So Missouri. So what part of Missouri? Where did you grow up in Missouri?
Okay, so I am from Grain Valley, which is outside of Kansas City. It's probably 45 minutes outside of the city proper. So I grew up in kind of an interesting town because when I was born, it was very, very rural.
Right.
The year I was born, we had one school, I think, and the graduating class was 82 students, so pretty small. And when I graduated, there were 4 elementary schools, 2 middle schools, and a high school. And my graduating class was 222 or something like that. And now my brother, who's 8 years younger than I am, is a junior in high school, and his class is 500 something. So it's been exponential growth over the last 25 years. And it's weird because when I was born, the house I grew up in, for the first several years of my life, it was really, there was nobody. We had the people across the street who named their house Rocky Top. And, it would take 10 minutes to walk over there,
Right.
And so we jokingly called our house Rocky Bottom because it was at the end of the hill.
Sure.
And then, there was no subdivisions there. It was a 15-minute drive to the elementary school. And now I could walk to the closest elementary school. The field literally that I used to play in, the meadow that I played in as a little kid, it's all housing developments now. So that's kind of, it was interesting because I got kind of both experiences. I got the experience of, I grew up, on acreage and what was a farmhouse, but I also got, you can walk to your friend's house, because she lives in the new subdivision, a mile down the road.
Sure.
So, and so that's where I grew up. And then I went to Arizona for school, and then I moved here 2 years and some change ago.
So you're still relatively new to New York at this point.
Yeah.
Gosh, this will be my 10th year in June, which is, I still feel like I just moved here. All my memories of right before I moved still feel so very fresh, oddly enough. I don't know if that's just because it was a momentous time and I remember it pretty well. So growing up in Missouri, because I want to connect this country thing. Missouri, it would be considered the South, yes?
No.
Or is it the Midwest?
So it's the Midwest.
It's the Midwest.
And that is very dependent on who you ask. So I grew up outside Kansas City is definitely the Midwest. People down in Springfield, people around Cape Girardeau probably consider themselves the South. The person I dated in high school lived 3 hours south of me in what we lovingly called the bowels of Missouri. And there was a kid at his school named Huckleberry, so it is, there's a very distinct dividing line to some degree. And I definitely consider it the Midwest. Most of my family does, but it's really interesting. It wasn't until I moved to Arizona and people were like, "Oh, so you're from the South?" And I never conceptualized that Missouri could be the South. I was like, no, Midwest, same as Wisconsin. What are you talking about? So that was really weird for me. And it's interesting here because generally people in New York from the Midwest think I'm from the Midwest, and people from everywhere else think I'm from the South. And I'm like, okay, that's interesting.
Yeah, I'm from Maryland, and my fiance is born and raised in Brooklyn, so she thinks I'm from the South. But if I was to tell someone from South Carolina, I'm from Maryland, I'm from the South, they'd be like, no, you're not.
No, you're not.
But Maryland is weird because if you go north enough, it feels like doesn't feel like the South, but where I grew up definitely does.
Yeah.
My county was definitely making America great again, the whole thing. But I could never say that to
right.
anyone But yeah, I think especially in the Northeast, I think if they have a general idea that your state votes Republican generally,
Right.
or if they hear like, oh, this senator made this fucked up law about women's reproductive rights, that's all considered the South.
Right.
That could be Alaska, and they would call
Yeah.
it the South.
Yeah,
That's just
absolutely.
the South just becomes a synonym for racist, backward, ignorant
Right.
people.
Yeah, right. And growing up, I think that also part of it is my perception because, people who I went to high school with, maybe some of them think of it as the South because I was definitely a little bit like as much as people in New York think that I'm kind of country, people in Missouri didn't always think that. I had a person at my high school say that I was too cityfied, which is kind of funny to me. But I think it's because my parents were always very much, we're going to go on trips. We're going to see different parts of America. We're going to go do things in the city. Like
Sure.
It was not a huge deal for us to drive 45 minutes to Kansas City to go to, the plaza or to go to something like an event or a concert. And a lot of families just didn't do that. A lot of families went to the racetrack. They went to the one bar, which is Whiskey Tango, and that was it. And so, I think it is kind of just a mindset thing. And, that's something I probably never even would have realized had I not left. And it is interesting to compare people's perceptions in New York versus Missouri versus Arizona, especially because Arizona does have that. I lived in Phoenix, and there is definitely that concept of anywhere that's not Phoenix is backwards and racist, and that's not necessarily true, although Phoenix is definitely a blue spot in a mostly red state. And so
Sure.
that's kind of been interesting to make those comparisons over the years too.
Yeah. Oh, no, 100%. I guess just thinking about it, like talking to you right now, my perception of you in this conversation, like I get a lot of like Midwestern vibes, but mostly just because you're very nice. Because previously, the only other, I think, interaction I had had with you was, did you and Matt do some kind of show for Cinderblock Comedy Festival one year? I think I remember you like taking shots at Patrick Hasty while he was doing comedy on stage,
Absolutely,
eating
yeah.
a salad
Yeah.
during his salad year.
Yeah.
I
remember the salad year. That was the first time I ever came here.
Oh, really?
We still lived in Arizona, and we came for the Cinderblock Festival. And up until then, I had been like, I'm going to move to LA when I graduate from college, and then visited here. And I was like, never mind. I'm schlepping across the country.
Of course.
And that was Matt's show, The Store's Objection, which I produce for him, and which we've done at lots of festivals. We do it now here in New York again at QED regularly.
Cool.
So, yeah, so that was and it's funny too because Hasty's from the Midwest.
Yeah, he's from Iowa. He, Reem, and Gideon, the I call him the Iowa contingent.
Yeah.
Yes, similar kind of vibe. Just as that very much like there's so much Midwest in that. That's why I think Wegmans is in Brooklyn now because so much Midwest has moved.
That makes sense.
To New York City.
That absolutely makes sense.
That's why Wegmans is here now.
If only we could get a Hy-Vee. Hy-Vee is my hometown grocery store. I remember when the big Hy-Vee opened. It took over what used to be the Big Lots. The Big Lots moved down the block. And I think Kmart used to be there. I don't think we got a new Kmart. But man, when the big Hy-Vee opened, I was in high school. All my friends worked there. Everyone worked there. I would go and I would bring them all. I would buy candy bars and then bring them to all my friends. I would buy candy bars at Hy-Vee and then bring them to my friends who worked at Hy-Vee. And it was a big deal because they had the deli. They had you could sit and eat at the Hy-Vee. And now there's ones that have bars and things. But it was such a big deal when we got that big grocery store.
Yeah, that sounds pretty exciting. I remember. Kmart was actually the first job I ever had, like the first summer after my freshman year of college, and it finally closed, and I was like, yes, because oh my god, that was torturous.
Oh, was it?
And not just by retail standards, but because it was fucking Kmart. I one time had to. I don't know how this ended up happening, but I got roped into like some sort of like promotional thing they were doing. So I was like putting on like polo shirts and like strutting on a really flimsy runway in front of the Kmart cafeteria.
Oh man, you have to pay me money to wear a polo shirt.
Yeah, it was not. I mean, it was better than being on a cash register for a day.
I guess,
but,
and I guess I guess you did get paid money to wear a polo shirt. So
$6 an hour. That was what they were paying me.
Yeah, that's I'd ask for more than that.
Yeah, that was just. I mean, I was like, I needed something, so that's what I ended up doing until I got back to college.
How funny.
Oh my God. But yeah, so and then my other perception just now, I guess when I would think of the South is the discussion of country music. So when I think of country, I think of the South, and specifically when I think of Nashville, nowadays I think of a very slickly polished country music
Right.
that is geared towards pop radio.
Right.
So what's your perception of what real country is? Because to me, my idea of real country is somebody like Ryan Bingham.
See, and that's so interesting. I grew up. I'm very close to my grandmother. My grandma is 93 now. She lives 5 minutes from my parents. So she was always around when I was growing up, and so she's a big Loretta Lynn fan. Lots of George Jones. My dad loves Jerry Jeff Walker, Waylon Jennings, and my mom has several best of women in country, and all of that is 50s, 60s, 70s country. And then further back with my grandcracker, because she she's born in 1926. She has lots of artists who did the Grand Ole Opry, and lots of folks who have kind of been people who are our age today probably you've never heard of unless they had a grandma who saved all those CDs that she got when CDs first became a thing and listened to them. So,
Sure.
I don't think I listened to a ton of country that came out past, probably like 90, 92. And that's something that actually Sarah Kennedy remedied in a big way for me, because I was so antsy. I'm like, I don't know if I want to listen to any of that. And we have an episode of Tadar that's about Taylor's connections to country music and the history of queer culture in country music, because you look at artists like Chelly Wright, who is a singer-songwriter who came out and was in the closet for a long time. And
did she do the song "Single White Female"?
I think so.
I saw that there was a documentary about her. I saw that. Yeah, I know her.
Yeah, and she's written a biography about her experiences, and it's interesting because up until, really the 60s and 70s, country music was in a lot of ways aligned with queer interest, because country music was considered for the working class.
Yeah.
And for a long time, queer interests were kind of seen as something that was for the working class. It was seen as something that was aligned with even poverty. That's why you see in a lot of country western music and media and books especially, you see a lot of homoeroticism. You see some subtle queer themes. Even just the concept of being a lone wolf, of being an outsider. That's something you can say that phrase and it'll apply to the queer community. Yeah. It'll apply to, a cowboy.
Marginalized group.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that, at some point, queer interests became positioned as something that was for the Hollywood elite, which is not true.
I agree. What if secretly every country song that's about my truck is secretly like, okay, it's like, okay, I'm imagining like a closeted gay country singer who's
right.
just really wants to sing about this hot guy, but he can't.
Yeah.
So the producer's like, okay, make it about a truck instead.
Right. It's a truck that's shiny and hard and strong and beautiful and goes real fast.
And you just want to rev it.
Yeah, you want to rev it.
You want it to rev
you.
You
want to be in that truck.
Yeah,
you want to be in the back of that truck.
Yeah, you just want to spin around in that truck. Yeah. Really get to know it.
Yeah, exactly. And that's it's so horny, right?
Yeah.
So many songs about trucks are so horny.
No, they absolutely are.
And it's like, you're not talking about a truck.
Yeah. And people always get on country music for not being a relatively metaphor-free genre of music. But now, listen to all country songs about trucks as if they are a man singing about a man that he can't have.
Right.
Because he hasn't come to terms with himself yet.
Right. And any song that's a country song by a woman about a breakup, assume that as soon as that song is done, she goes and finds herself a nice wife. Like, just assume, because think about Carrie Underwood singing about before he cheats, all she's doing is making it easier on the next girl, you know?
Sure.
The next girl then will not date him and will date her instead. This is my conspiracy theory. Everyone, all of them are queer.
I would totally buy that. And for that one woman and this is my sort of like id brain thinking, that I always wonder why. And I know she was popular. She was the peak of her career was in the 90s. If there's a genre of music that I feel like a lesbian could still come out and still have a pretty good time at, when I think of most country fans, I view a very lesbian friendly group of dudes. That's my perception. I'm probably wrong though, but
I think that too is very geographically dependent, and I think that country has kind of shed some of the stigma that it developed. I mean, especially in, the early aughts, as they say.
Yes.
I think that people distanced themselves, especially, in 2002 to 2003, country music was really kind of about one thing, and it was patriotism, and that,
especially after 9/11,
that really reshaped people's view of country music for a while. And I think it's only in like the last 5 years that, people in coastal cities have kind of opened up to, saying, okay, I can be progressive, I can be a liberal, I can identify this way and still like country music. And I think that a lot of that harkens back to the country music of, the 60s and 70s. That's very like, screw the man, working people count. And then
very punk rock kind of themes. And that old country music's all, punk rock's all 3 chords in the truth, and old country is 3 chords.
Yeah.
Basically.
Yeah.
Makes total sense.
And that's, I think, we've seen the resurgence, especially of like pop punk in the last 5 years.
Which I'm so happy about.
I know. And we've seen that. And so it makes sense that, country is kind of coming into its own as, and again, I think that's very, I think it's geographically and ideologically, has some restraints. I think there are definitely still parts of the country where country music is real popular and queer people are not.
Definitely.
But I do think that it's definitely expanded. And you look at just the last couple years and just redefining what country is as a genre, what counts as country music. You look at Old Town Road, and it's nice. I think that genre bending is becoming the norm, and it's just, it's the same as all democratization of information, right? The internet makes everything fluid.
Oh, absolutely. And if you listen, and speaking of the death of genre, which I'm really big on, because I like that you can like everything and not get like, I used to like, oh, that's not real punk, or that's not real that. The fact that Lil Nas X EP, the songs that weren't singles are like Travis Barker from Blink-182 is playing on it, and they're pop punk songs, but he's rapping over it.
Right.
It's really, really interesting stuff. The thing I hope happens next with that, because I agree with you 100%, because they used to, like, Brooklyn hipsters used to call like anything that was like vaguely country-esque, they would call it like alt country or Americana, like Wilco, like Uncle Tuplow's bands like that. But I feel like the perception of like the connection of, if you like country music, you are a blindly patriotic, like Toby Keith character.
Right.
The next thing I want to have happen is I was really into, I went through a big like metal phase when I was in high school, and I still think like modern new metal, like bands like Stained or Drowning Pool, is still like viewed like negatively by the like coastal elites. Like it's viewed as like it's angry music. It's music for angry white people who don't have anything they should be angry about.
Yeah.
And then I think, and I have a theory about this as well. When the Iraq War started and Drowning Pool's Bodies, it came known that like soldiers were blasting that in tanks as they were blowing up Iraq.
Yeah.
I think that's a pretty hard association to
that very, very
break.
Toxic masculinity reputation that I think it's gained, and that is to some degree.
Yeah.
I mean, I think people dismiss punk and pop punk the same way. I think that people have not just underdeveloped notions of what punk is, and what punk is about, and the anger that comes across in it sonically that doesn't necessarily reflect the nature of the lyrics, or that reflects something underlying the lyrics, or even reverse those, and you have songs that sound playful and they're really not. And I think that that's what music is meant to do is challenge our perceptions of what we're hearing and how we feel about it. And, then you get onto the internet and you interpolate these songs in different ways with covers or, with someone rapping over them. And it's, it's meant to, it's just like any other form of media. It's just like television or literature where it should be challenging you and it should be doing things that are unexpected, because otherwise it's not, and I do think that pop music now does that in a way that it used to not. I think that, pop music is something that I've only recently really been looking at with a critical eye, in a way that I usually would turn to television or literature or movies, and looking at popular music through, the lens of, okay, when we treat this as text, what are we gaining from it? When we treat this as something to be read, something to be not just consumed, but when we look at how it functions in the light of different comparisons, treating it like comparative literature essentially. And that's what, we do with Tadar and kind of comparing Taylor Swift to her contemporaries. And obviously that's had a big impact on me and looking at pop music more generally. But even comparing, someone like Ariana Grande, someone who's very vocally talented and whose music I'm not a huge fan of, but comparing those albums and looking at what's influenced her, how she's changed for her fans, how she's changed politically. It is something that I think has value and has a lot more depth of meaning than people are willing to give it. And I think that's true across genres, and that's why it's so important for people to explore stuff that they might not necessarily be super interested in. So what I'm saying is, give me your new metal recommendations.
Of course.
Make me a playlist after this. Send it over.
100%. That is one of my many skills. For on my Patreon supporters, on certain levels, I make custom playlists, and
that's so fun.
I talk about them in like solo episodes that I do by myself. I will say I will make you a new metal playlist. I will also say Japan's pop punk scene has some really great stuff. There's some bands that I'm like massive fans of, and they sometimes I can only understand, like, they'll sing the chorus in English, but it's enough to like get the hooks in. My favorite band from Japan right now is a pop punk band called the Winking Owl, that I describe as Paramore with more interesting guitar.
Cool.
Really like them. Really like them a lot.
I'm on board.
You can find a lot of their stuff on YouTube. I enjoy them quite a bit. Okay, so you're in Missouri, and at what point are you like, I gotta get out of Missouri?
Okay, so here's the funny thing. And I listened to an episode of the podcast before to get the feel.
Oh, really? Which one?
Miles, my buddy Miles.
Oh,
from Miles.
I love Miles.
I love Miles so much, and I was texting him quotes from the podcast the whole time. Which he was like, oh no. He's like, oh no, this takes a dark turn. I'm like, it's okay. You didn't talk about the volcano too much. I love him to pieces.
He's a great dude.
It was great. I loved that episode also.
Oh, thank you.
So I obviously know kind of the trajectory of here's my life story. But no, it is. I for a long time thought I was going to be a doctor. I was going to be a pediatrician, and I was going to go to UMKC, and I was going to commute from home, and then I was going to be a pediatric surgeon at a hospital in Missouri somewhere. And then so I'm a big dork, and I've always been a big dork, and I went to a lot of summer camps in school. So I went to just like a general like camping outside camp. I went to music, arts, drama, dance camp, which I ended up kind of getting bullied out of. It's fine.
Sorry.
And then I went to horseback camp. I went to
horseback camp.
Horseback
Oh,
camp.
horseback.
Man, horseback camp where I'm just training horses. I did train llamas also, but that's not a camp. That's just a thing I did. Imagine if I was doing like fat camp for horses, where I was just making the horses work out. That'd be kind of fun.
Yeah, just a bunch of obese horses, and then they're like, all right, Gunpowder, you can do it. I believe in you.
Yeah. Oh man, Gunpowder's a great horse name. I went to a religious.
That's a good sketch. Horse fat camp.
That's
I'm
gonna steal that. I'm gonna take that.
Do it.
I shouldn't. I need to stop writing horse sketches. Jesus. Then I went to like a student government camp. Ultimately I went to this camp that was for gifted kids because I was a smarty, and it was basically college in the summer. You earn college credit, and then you're ahead of the game when you finally go to college. And this one in particular, I was the summer before I turned 16, and I went, and we were randomly assigned these groups, like these activities. So some kids, they were putting together a newsletter, and some kids were they were planning all the sports games, and I was randomly assigned to the nightly news team. And so the premise being, like what, 50, 60 kids, all of us high schoolers. And at the end of the day, we all get together in the common room and we present, here's what happened at camp today. Very, very cute. And we got thrown into our first planning meeting and I was like, hey, what if we just made this whole thing like Weekend Update? And instead of doing like news that they already know about, we did news bits and sketches and musical comedy bits. And that's what we did. And we had never done that before. And I never considered like, oh, I could do this all the time. I never considered, because we didn't have like community theater. I didn't have outlets for that. I had creative energy and I wrote little songs and stuff and was very jokey, and I wrote constantly. I've always been a writer, not just in the sketch sense, but I was like, okay, this is something that I don't really have an outlet for, but it's there. It's kind of fun. It's just a facet of my personality. And then I did this camp, and for 10 days, basically I was writing sketches every day and performing them every night. And I came home and I remember asking my mom, I said, are you going to be upset if I don't want to be a doctor? And she's like, no, of course not. You could be professional tap dancer and I'd still be proud of you. And I was like, well, it's close. And so I totally revamped what I wanted. And I'm very lucky because I basically had my pick of schools. And so I looked at different schools in California and, in Chicago and on both coasts. And ultimately, my mom was like, okay, you can't just go to school for comedy. That's not an option. So you do need to pick a major. And so I went with journalism because I was like, well, I'm constantly writing anyway. I wrote for the local paper. That was my first job. I was like, so this is probably what makes sense. And I toured schools, and Arizona State actually they have the Walter Cronkite School of Journalism, and they have far and away the best journalism program in the country in terms of resources, class size, professors, opportunities. Like, holy shit, good. Right. And at this point, I toured everything from, the University of Missouri, which is, kind of lauded as a great journalism school, to schools in Chicago and Stanford and Berkeley. And I was like, nothing stacks up. Especially in the realm of digital, ASU is leaps and bounds. And, maybe other schools have caught up, but
as far as just like the practice of journalism and then the getting people to give a shit part. Yeah.
Yes. And treating journalism as something that we need to adapt to, to the digital news cycle. Right. And a lot of schools, University of Missouri did not do that. I don't know that they have still. I don't have I did a long summer program there, 3 weeks. And I remember coming away from it and being like, it feels like I took this class in 1982, just because it was so behind in terms of how it treated journalism and just no recognition whatsoever of the internet. Right. And a lot of really great journalism schools were like that. So I ended up going to Arizona, which great because good weather. Phoenix, downtown Phoenix is a great community for the arts. I didn't get into comedy right away. I actually hosted the local poetry slam for 2 years. I ran an international poetry festival when I was 19, the individual world poetry slam. We were the host city that year. So I did that. And then I was like, okay, I think I'm done with poetry. I think I want to do comedy. And then hosted a variety show and did a lot of stand-up. And now I'm out here, and now I mostly do sketch and musical comedy, which is ideal.
So you did start in stand-up.
Yeah. And that was mostly just because it's the lowest barrier to entry. And
especially like, well, I don't know if there's like an equivalent of like a UCB or a Pitt in Phoenix. Not really. Yeah. So, but yeah, there's any place can have a microphone, and it's like I got thoughts in my head. Yeah. And I gotta get them out. And were you a fan of stand-up before this?
No. And you know what? I don't like stand-up.
Really?
I don't. I've always hated it. I've always mostly thought it was bad. I don't know.
Watching it or doing it? Probably both.
Well, you know what? I hated watching it. Still do pretty much. You hear this John Mulaney character? Because I only heard of him last year.
Yeah, I'm familiar with John Mulaney.
I really am. Pretty bad. I know a lot of sketch comedy. I've watched tons and tons and tons of SNL. The first 30 seasons. I had everything on DVD. Lots of Steve Martin. Lots of I watched a lot of Hee Haw because, again, Missouri.
course.
And so lots and lots of sketch comedy. I had every episode of The Carol Burnett Show. So that's very much where I kind of cut my teeth. And then I was just like, well, this is just doing that, but with just myself, so I can do that. And yeah, you know, I sometimes I loved it, and mostly I did not love it. But it kept me writing. And in my first year of stand-up, I never did the same set twice. I wrote new jokes for every single set.
Nice.
And so that was, I mean, I think that's a good writing exercise in
100%.
in terms of, I never like tried to grind and get a tight 5. I was like, nope, new jokes every night. And then, I also ran a comedy variety show with Matt Stores, who, that's how I met him. And,
so you guys met in Phoenix.
yeah.
Cool.
And met through comedy, and, you know, worked on his show, The Store's Objection, produced my own show, Lady Killers, did theater and stuff in Phoenix too. So very kind of all over the place. But, you know, remember, I was also going to school full time and working full time. So stand up was kind of what fit into my schedule for the most part. I didn't really have time to rehearse stuff.
Yeah. No, that schedule makes total sense.
Yeah.
When I was in college, towards the end, I was working full time. I was taking a whole bunch of credits, and doing stand up, and I was in plays.
Yep.
So I was never sleeping.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which is how I found to, like, you know, I stay motivated.
Yeah.
I don't like slowing down.
I don't either.
Anymore.
Yeah, no, that's the thing too. Whenever I feel like bad about myself, I'm like, I remember in college when you like did way more and didn't die. So come on, pick it up.
Yeah, and now I always view busy as a result of things are going well.
Yeah,
because I spent a lot of years in my old apartment, you know, being sad and not doing anything. So the fact that I got a schedule is nice.
Yeah,
because I'm, you know, working. You know, I'm getting married. I'm in a band. I do tech for shows. I do this. It is a lot.
Yeah.
Okay. So you start, and it's good to, like, I feel like you have to do lots of stuff to find out, like, your thing. Cause I know lots of stand-ups and lots of my friends that start in stand-up, and then they discover that sketch is their thing, like Kevin Froelic's, or like filmmaking is their thing, like writing. Like, so I feel like you kind of got to do it all. I'm curious what stand-up you are watching, because I swear to you that there is good stand-up in the world.
I'm sure. I just don't like it.
That's always funny to me to hear.
Here's the stand-up I like. I like John Mulaney, who I discovered last year. I like pretty much the 2 Ellen videos that my mom showed me on YouTube over and over. And then I like anytime that Steve Martin is the host on SNL. That's it.
Yeah,
that's the list.
Steve Martin's is great. I love when he's on SNL. John Mulaney, when he hosts, the 2 times he's hosted, has been pretty great also. Have you seen his newest Netflix special, The Sack Lunch Bunch?
Oh, yes.
It's delightfully weird,
it's
and
so
I
good.
enjoy it very much.
I like it a lot. So another thing, I don't recognize celebrities. Never ever. So it's pretty fun. I think the only people I recognized in that, I recognized Natasha Lyonne and David Byrne. And then the rest, I was like, who are these people? Which is always fun when I watch things with people. I've seen Little Women 3 times. And did you know that the dad is Bob Odenkirk, who's apparently a comedy man?
Yeah, I know. I haven't seen the new Little Women. I haven't seen it yet, but the Bob Odenkirk's in that?
Yeah, he's the dad.
Oh, that's pretty cool.
Did you know he's a comedian? I did not know this.
Bob Odenkirk is one half of maybe one of the most influential sketch comedy shows of, like, the last 30 years.
Which is Mr. Show.
Mr. Show.
Which I've heard of.
Yeah.
But
he was
I think
also
I've seen 2 Mr. Show sketches. But
did you ever watch Breaking Bad? Or
no. I watched the last episode.
He's on Breaking Bad also. He was Walter White's lawyer,
and
then he's done 5 seasons of a prequel to Breaking Bad called Better Call Saul.
Is he Saul?
Yeah, he's Saul.
He's Saul?
Yeah, Bob Odenkirk is Saul.
I had no idea. I genuinely did not know this. I knew that Better Call Saul existed.
Well, I am so glad we could break this on the show.
This is great.
Some exciting stuff.
When I asked who he was, someone was like, he's in Better Call Saul, but I didn't know, like, who he played. He's Saul?
He's Saul.
You know, I got my dad a Better Call Saul keychain for Christmas.
Oh, really?
Or for Father's Day last year. I'd never seen it. They've seen it.
I've seen a couple episodes, but it's good. Like, the writing's good, the acting's good. It's just it's one of those shows, and I love shows like this, but it's one of those shows where it's very hard. I have to be in a very like right frame of mind to like watch it and appreciate it.
Yes.
Otherwise, I have if I'm too tired, I have a hard time following it. Which is part of why I think The Big Bang Theory was on TV for so long, because you don't really have to follow.
You can drop in and out.
Yeah. You drop in and out, and if you're like a nurse who is at the end of a 16-hour shift, you're not going to like sit down and understand the nuances of Chernobyl, you know?
Yeah, no, you're not.
You're looking for something stupid.
It's hard to watch Chernobyl when you're already feeling good, you know?
Yeah, I watched it. I took a Saturday and watched it while my fiance was out of town, and I had forgot. I'd never seen a human being melt.
Yes.
Like literally turn into a puddle.
Yeah, Matt read the book that Chernobyl's based off of, and then he watched it, and I basically would wander in every episode and just kind of look for a while and then say no, and then go away. I'm bad at TV. I'm bad at watching TV. Too much. Why would I do that? Why make me tired? Hard, difficult. What if they have British accents? Then I won't know what's happening. No. Too much for me. Can't do it. Too much. You know what I watched? Here's the shows I've watched. I've seen Pushing Daisies. I've seen all of Hannibal. I've seen all of HBO's The Leftovers, which is the best show of all time. I've seen HBO's Watchmen, which is a close second. And I've seen every episode of ER. So I'm covered. I'm good. I don't ever need to watch
any more TV.
That's it for me. I'm good.
Well, if you do ever decide you need like an extra show, The Good Place.
I've seen The Good Place.
The Good Place is very funny. I like The Good Place. I also like I've been watching Kim's Convenience, which is
it looks very good, and
which is funny.
And I'm like, what if I watched it? That would probably be nice.
Yeah.
But
It's it's like a half hour. They're quick and fun. I've been trying to watch The Witcher.
Matt watched all of that, and I was like, don't like it.
It's for me. That's a show that like, cause like my fiance and I like, the only thing I think we've ever agreed on is that like we'll watch documentaries together. But the shows she likes, I don't. And the shows I like, she does not. So I'm either watching them really late at night or just in another room while she's watching reality TV. So
yeah, I'm usually reading when Matt's watching TV. Big reader. And sometimes I'll drop in. And does The Witcher have dragons? It kind of looks like it's got dragons in it.
I haven't gotten that far yet, but it feels like a dragon-esque world.
Yeah, I don't really do dragons.
Yeah,
didn't do Game of Thrones. Too many dragons. No.
I didn't do Game of Thrones either. And now I don't know. I might someday. But now that I know how hard it drops off at the end, because it's always a bummer to like, you really like a show and then it drops the ball at the end. That's got to be unfortunate. This is
how I felt. I watched the first 2 seasons of Miss Maisel, and the end of the second season, spoilers, but also season 3 is out, so yeah. End of the second season, literally the last minute of the show, she gets back with her freaking ex-husband. And so I haven't watched season 3. I'm like, no, you ruined it. You missed your chance. That's it. I don't have time to be this disappointed. It was a great season of television until that last minute, and she had really developed as a character, and I felt for her arc. And even though like sometimes the stand-up was kind of hokey, I was like, okay, this is good. And now I'm like, nope, you missed it. Never. So I don't know what happens. You can tell me. It's fine.
They don't stay together.
Good. Does she get pregnant?
No.
Okay. Well, so they just boink for no reason then? Well, I don't know if that's better or worse.
Here's what I'll say. It goes back and forth. There's a funny thing that happens in the middle of season 3. I don't want to. You can
tell me later.
I don't want to wreck it. Yeah, I'll tell you off air. But season 3 had some fun moments. I would be curious to see what happens in season 4. But I totally get you. I watched that and I was like, interesting choice. Okay. The thing I like about the way stand-up is presented in that show compared to a show like Crashing, which I didn't watch, is, and the reason, and it's nothing against Pete Holmes, it's just that like, I've bombed at the Grizzly Pear. I don't need to watch people bomb at the Grizzly Pear on TV.
Yeah.
So they don't spend a ton of time like on the writing jokes part. They just get to like her being funny on stage, which I honestly prefer, because the like grind of stand-up on TV is not
it's relentless. It's like, why would I do that when I have that in my own life?
Yeah, basically. Or like, I don't know if there's like 30 Rock didn't spend a ton of time on like writing the sketches.
Haven't seen it.
funny.
The lady's name is Liz Lemon.
It is. Her name is Liz Lemon. They had a Liz Lemon brand of Ben and Jerry's frozen Greek yogurt.
Well, that's fun. Jane Krakowski's in it, and she's very cool.
Yeah, she's very funny on the show. I didn't watch 30 Rock for a long time either, but then I was like, oh, okay, I'll give it a shot, and I laughed. So
I've seen the first episode like 6 times, and I'm always like, and then I don't never go any further.
I get into stuff like 5 years after it goes off air.
I watch a lot of things to the point where I decide I'm done with them. Like I watched The Office and Parks and Rec to the point where April and Andy got together and Jim and Pam got together, and then I was like, I'm done. Mm-hmm. They're married? Okay, I'm done. Bye-bye. And that was it.
I only got through season 2 of The Office.
Yeah.
And then so you're doing sketch in Arizona, and then when do you and Matt decide you're going to go to New York? Is that the plan the whole time, or does that come on later?
I had in college, I had lived in LA for a few months for a fellowship over a summer. And I had thought like, okay, LA is, 5 hours? 5 hours from Phoenix. Quick drive. So it's like, all right, you know what? When I'm done here, when I finish school, I'm just going to pack up, move to LA, call it good. And then that September, my senior year of college, I spent a lot of time traveling for comedy festivals. And I was working on my senior thesis. Since I was in the honors college, I had to do a full thesis. So, that afforded me a little bit of flexibility in my schedule. But I went a lot of places for festivals, and went to California and went to New York and other places, went to Missouri. We came out, Matt and I came out to do the Store's Objection at Cinder Block, and that's where we met. And you
Indeed.
and I,
Yes,
and I dunked on Pat Hasty as God intended, and lots of other comedians, because that's the premise of the show.
Yeah, that's the premise of the show. He was I think he was the best at firing back.
Yeah.
He's quick on the draw.
Yeah, he is. And came out here for that, and I was like, oh no, my plan is ruined. But
because did you just love New York?
I loved it, and I was like, I will not be happy if I don't live here. And I was like, Matt, you know how we talked about moving to LA? Can we move to New York? Is that fine? He's like, yeah, of course. And so I moved out here. I moved out here by myself in August. Matt worked for the federal government, so he had to wait for a transfer request. And then like 6-ish months later, in January, he followed me. So this week is, I guess, his 2-year anniversary of living here. And mine was in August. He actually tomorrow is actually our anniversary of dating, 4 years.
Oh, congrats.
And he got here on our anniversary. So tomorrow is both our anniversary and his 2-year anniversary of being here.
Well, that's adorable.
Yeah. And so that's our happy story.
That's very cool. And how is the balance of show and personal? Because this is something I had to learn is making sure that I'm there for Chelsea while also continuing to be super ambitious. It helps that she's very into her work also, so like we're compatible in that way. But do you ever find and I know you guys are more sketch. Does Matt do stand up?
Matt does stand up.
Matt does stand up.
Matt does stand up way more than I do, and is much better. And he's on a couple shows coming up, and he also does sketch. We're in the same sketch group. And I would say
Infinite Sketch.
Yeah,
cool.
and I would say he does more stand up, and I do more musical comedy. So and then sketches. So I'm listeners, I'm making a Venn diagram with my hands. So sketch is there in the middle, and this is Matt, and this is me, and sketch is the one thing we have in common. And then I have just abandoned stand-up with no pretense. So I think that's, I think it is a good balance there, just because like we have one thing that we both do, and then we can support each other on the other things.
Yeah.
But also like it's important to remember that Matt and I are idiosyncratic in that we are very big communicators. So one thing that we will do is like when we're upset about something, if something's causing stress or causing like issues in our relationship, we get a legal pad and write it down and write like, here's what I'm feeling, here's what I think is causing these feelings, here's some things that I feel like I'm not getting from you, here's some things that I would suggest. And then we discuss it like the same way that we would like, hey, the bathtub is clogged, we need to call a plumber.
Right.
It's troubleshooting. We're both kind of matter of fact about that, I think. And I think that's mostly because neither of us really wants to dick around, for lack of a better term. We don't, I don't want to, waste time on fighting. I want to be like, here's what I'm feeling. Here's what I'm dealing with. Here's where I don't feel supported. Here's what's stressing me out. And, he does the same where he's like, this is what's on my plate. This is what's causing me stress. This is stuff that I don't think that we can really address. And here's stuff that I think that you could help with. So, and that in terms of kind of making sure that our comedy workloads are balanced, so to speak, it's like, okay, you have shows these days this week. I have shows these days. Here's where we need to carve out time to hang out.
Yeah.
So
yeah, that's something I had to learn because for the longest time I was like, anything that is not related to comedy is a distraction, and that doesn't really work.
No, not at all.
Long term, if you're trying to be human, I feel I got through the phase of like, of needing to of not needing to be a human,
right?
To be a comedian.
Yes, to just be a machine. Yeah.
Yeah. And I feel like that gets over romanticized a bit by people who want to take advantage of newer comedians. That's a personal thing, vendetta I have against a lot of people.
I very much agree. Well, and also, it's important to remember Matt and I worked together as just comedian friends for over a year before we ever started dating. And actually, the day that we started dating, we'd finished a packet, submission packet, a writing packet that we worked on together. We submitted it, and then we were at my house, at my apartment. I sat him down. I said, listen, while we're still talking business, I think we should assess our relationship and see if maybe we should be boyfriend and girlfriend. I mean, it was like, we went from talking about like, okay, let's proofread page 3. Let's go ahead and see if we added, did we add a tag to this? Great. Let's submit it.
Sure.
And then just, okay, so are we in love? I mean, the answer is yes. And I mean, basically that was that. And then I was like, okay, well, we will date.
Excellent. That's so formal, but endearing. I love that.
Because I mean, imagine really how miserable we'd have been if we just like kind of futzed around like, oh, I don't know what I'm feeling. And I mean, I was just like, that's bothersome.
Like every like an episode of Girls.
Yes, and like, no, I'm not doing that. I'm like, I'm gonna say, listen, here's the deal. I love you. Sorry. If that's good, then we can date. And if not, then okay, fine. I'll deal with it with therapy. I mean, it's just like,
I'll deal with it with
that's fine. Like that's.
Well, I'm glad it worked out then.
Yeah.
Because otherwise, I guess you two would both be doing sad solo shows in tiny black box theaters.
I mean, probably for like a couple months, yeah. But by now, I probably would have moved on.
Well, you would
No.
you would hope so.
Yeah.
And you do musical comedy also. What instruments do you play?
I don't. I sing, and then
Sing and
I have friends who play instruments. God, I can't not write parody songs. It's truly a curse. So I have several friends who are musically talented, and I'm also a big musical theater dork. So I run a musical theater game show with Pat Riley. Sarah Kennedy actually used to co-host it, and then when she passed on to the Great Plains of New Mexico, it was passed down to me, and he and I staged that both at QED and then Don't Tell Mama. So that's fun to have like a cabaret environment.
Yeah.
And then I have a few other friends who I work with, and even some folks who aren't stand-up, who aren't really connected to the comedy community. I'm writing a couple of longer musical sketch pieces right now that I'm hoping to stage later this year that are still in the works. And so that's something that I never really like thought of myself as anyone who should ever sing in public at all. And then I was like, oh, but what if I did that because it's fun and not because I want to get on American Idol? And I've always written parody songs. I released a parody EP that I made myself that, again, I know nothing about sound engineering. So I literally just stole karaoke tracks and then sang over them and made it in GarageBand in my closet. I basically soundproofed my closet at our old apartment, and that was that. But I did it. I wrote the songs and I put it out, and I wrote a whole parody of Nicki Minaj's Super Bass. That's about the new Super Smash Brothers that came out a couple of years ago. So it's just like, I'm gonna be dead someday. I should just do this even if I'm not very good. But I do think I've gotten kind of good. So that's good news for me.
Well, that is very exciting. I don't know if you see the racks of guitars and amps in the corner, but so if you ever need somebody, hit me up, because I'm trying to up my, like, my main thing, something I do is I write freelance like podcast jingle songs. I've gotten paid to write some songs for people, but I'm trying to up the musical side as well as the as stand-up comedy has become increasingly more about fighting and being mean to each other on Twitter. I've been doing more music. So let's work on something sometime. And
I would literally love nothing more. That sounds ideal.
Well, fantastic.
Yeah, I would absolutely love that. Please. And yeah, I parody lyrics are just like the one thing I know how to do, and I have a wide range of musical interests. So whatever, rope me in.
Excellent. Sounds good. What can we plug before we get out here?
Well, Infinite Sketch comes back in February at the Pit Loft, and I'm quite excited for it. And so everyone should come to that. It is the Saturday the 22nd, a week before my parents' anniversary.
Oh, very exciting.
Also, plug my parents' anniversary. You guys can't come to the party because it's in Missouri, but like, tell them that we're proud. Just like, good job, Ted and Jess. You did it. You're still married. Your honeymoon video was real cute.
It's an accomplishment worth celebrating. So I hope you folks enjoy yourselves, and thank you so much for talking to me, Hattie.
Thank you for having me, and yeah, if you have any follow-up questions, just let me know.
Awesome, sounds good. Thank you so much. Okay, folks, that's our show. Thank you so much for tuning in this week. I really appreciate you folks being here. In addition to Hattie's shows that she mentioned, you can also listen to her podcast with Sarah Kennedy, Tadar, wherever you get your podcasts. And I hope that I get to work on some music stuff with her in the future, because I think that would be pretty fun. Again, that's our show for this week. You can follow me on Twitter at Comic Will Carey, and you can listen to Between Awesome and Disaster wherever you get your podcasts, including the one you're listening to right now, because that one is great. Also want to give a shout out to Mary Beth Mooney, my supporter on Patreon at the awesome producer level. Thank you so much for your support. I really appreciate it. If you guys want to check out some of the other exclusive rewards I have available for people who support me on Patreon, you can go to patreon.com/awesomedisaster and check out what I have available over there. And thank you guys so much for being here and listening to this show. It's one of my favorite creative projects that I've taken on in my career, and I only want to continue making this show as great and as excellent as it can be. So thank you guys for being here, and I will see you next week between Awesome and Disaster. Take care, everybody.